Office Tax Appeals. I will be commencing in about 5 minutes, so if you guys can just hang tight for a minute. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Claudia Lopez with the California Office of Tax Appeals, and we are about to begin the telephonic hearing of Maria L. Abadesco. I would like to confirm that all the participants are on the line, starting with the taxpayer and her representative. So, Ms. Abadesco. How about Ms. Bukhalfa? Ms. Abadesco and Ms. Bukhalfa. Hi, good morning. Is this Ms. Bukhalfa?
Hi, this is Keaton from Franchise Tax Board. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mr. Nam. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I'm present on the call. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. We're going to try this again. This is Claudia with the California Office of Tax Appeals, and we're about to begin the telephonic hearing of Maria L. Abadesco. I would like to confirm that all the participants are on the line, starting with the taxpayer and her representative. So, Ms. Buchhofer?
Yes, I'm present.
Perfect. And Ms. Abadesco?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Perfect. Now for respondent, the Franchise Tax Board, we have Mr. Nam.
Good morning. Keaton for Franchise Tax Board on the call.
Perfect. Now for our panel, we have Judge Ewing.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Judge Johnson
Good morning.
and Ms. Judge Brown.
Yes, good morning.
Okay, thank you all for calling in, and we are ready to begin the hearing.
Thank you, Claudia. Well, good morning to you all, and welcome to the telephonic oral hearing in the appeal of Maria Abadesco. I'm Judge Elliott Scott Ewing speaking. I will state my name each time that I speak, and I ask you to identify yourself each time you speak. We have found that to be very helpful in these electronic hearings, especially when there's several folks on the call like there is today. I am the lead administrative law judge for purposes of conducting this hearing. I'm joined by Judge John Johnson and Judge Suzanne Brown. While I'm the lead for purposes of conducting this hearing, we three will deliberate and decide all the issues presented. Each of us will have an equal vote in those deliberations. Now, because of ongoing concerns pertaining to the coronavirus and consistent with the governor's executive order N-25-20, the Office of Tax Appeals has decided that it is in the public's best interest to move the Office of Tax Appeals' April calendar to telephonic hearings. We are holding these hearings telephonically with the agreement of both the taxpayer and the agency's representative, and this change will not impact the fair and objective hearings of the tax appeals. This hearing is being conducted entirely electronically. All participants, including the administrative law judges, are dialing into this hearing. Please note that, unlike the pre-hearing conference in this matter that was held on April 7th, 2020, the audio from this telephonic oral hearing will be live streamed to the public, and a stenographer will transcribe the audio of this hearing. Please have the telephonic oral hearing information for this call handy in case you lose connectivity and need to quickly reconnect. Now, if this happens, once you have reconnected, immediately announce that you're back on and don't wait for a break in the discussion so that we know that we lost you for a moment or however long that was and that you are immediately back on. That would be very helpful to know that for us. Our stenographer, Ms. Alonzo, is using her equipment to take down everything that is said on the record. To help us make a clear record that can be easily understood when read, we ask the following. Each time you speak or begin any statement, like I said, please restate your name. Speak slowly and clearly into the microphone. Please do not interrupt when someone is speaking. That's important for Ms. Alonzo to perform her work. And please do not engage in casual conversation. If a comment can be heard through the microphone, Ms. Alonzo is required to report it. If Ms. Alonzo cannot hear, understand, or identify someone, she has permission to interrupt us at any time. As an important reminder, the Office of Tax Appeals is a completely separate agency and is independent of the Franchise Tax Board and any other tax agency. Please note that Judge John Johnson has replaced Judge Amanda Vassig on this panel, and I have moved over to the role of lead judge. Please note that I will repeat this once we're on the record as well. Ms. Bukalfa, do you have any questions before we go on the record?
Munya Bukalfa, no, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nam, do you have any questions before we go on the record?
Keaton, no questions.
Okay. Judge Johnson and Judge Brown, are you ready to go on the record?
Judge Johnson, yes, I am.
This is Judge Brown. Yes, I am.
Okay, and finally, Ms. Alonzo, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, we are now on the record. Good morning. I am Judge Elliott Scott Ewing. We are opening the record in the appeal of M. Abadesco, case number 180-93774. This hearing is being convened telephonically on April 29th, 2020 at 10 a.m. The hearing location is Sacramento, California. Representing appellant today, we have on the line Munia Bukalfa with the Tax Appeals Assistance Program. Ms. Bukalfa, please state your name and the spelling of your name for the record.
Munia Bukalfa, that is M-O-U-N-I-A. Last name is B-O-U-K-H-A-L-F-A.
Thank you. We also have appellant Maria Abadesco, who we understand will testify today. Ms. Abadesco, please state your name and spell your name for us.
Yes, Maria Abadesco, M-A-R-I-A, Abadesco, A-B-A-D as in David, E, S as in Sam, C-O.
Thank you. And finally, for Franchise Tax Board, we have on the line G. Nam. Mr. Nam, please state your name and spell your name for the record.
Nam, it's G-I-N-A-M.
Thank you. All right. As a preliminary matter, as I mentioned before, please note that Judge John Johnson has replaced Judge Amanda Vassig on this panel, and I have moved over to the role of lead judge on the panel. Now, let's talk about the issues. Let's just make sure that we're all on the same page and what the issues are before us. There's two issues. The first issue is whether appellant has shown that her failure to timely pay her tax was due to reasonable cause in order to abate the late payment penalty. And second, whether appellant has established a basis to abate interest. Ms. Bukalfa, is that correct?
Munia Bukalfa, that is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Nam, is that also your understanding?
Nam, yes, that's correct.
Very well. This is Judge Ewing. Thank you. Now, with respect to exhibits, we have marked respondents' Franchise Tax Board's exhibits A through L. Next, appellant provided her exhibits, and we have marked them as appellant's exhibits 1 through 7. The minutes and orders from the pre-hearing conference in this matter requested any objection to these exhibits being admitted into evidence no later than April 13th. No objection was received. No objections being raised, respondents' exhibits A through L are admitted as evidence into the record, and appellant's exhibits 1 through 7 are also admitted as evidence into the record. No additional exhibits have been presented today. On April 7th, 2020, minutes and orders, we indicated time estimates for the hearing. I'll talk about that. I plan for the hearing to proceed as follows. Ms. Bukalfa, you will represent your position and have 5 minutes to do so. Next, Mr. Nam will present the Franchise Tax Board's position and also have 5 minutes to do so. I will then swear in appellant, Ms. Abadesco, as a witness. Ms. Abadesco will then have 15 minutes for her testimony. It had been indicated previously that appellant would testify in the narrative, but Ms. Bukalfa, please feel free to direct the testimony and ask any questions as you see fit. Once the parties and the panel have had a chance to ask questions, appellant's representative, Ms. Bukalfa, will then have 5 minutes for any closing remarks. Please note that these are just time estimates and guidelines. If you do not need to use all the time allotted, that's just fine. And if you reach the end of your allotted time but need more time, we will consider that request. Now, for appellant's opening statement, Ms. Bukalfa, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. You may proceed when you are ready.
Thank you. Munia Bukalfa. On April...
Judge, I'm sorry. This is Nam. Judge, may I permission to speak?
Yes, please go ahead.
Just a procedural question. Is Franchise Tax Board presenting statements after the testimony, witness testimony?
You would. The plan is to do your opening statement before the witness testimony, and then you will have a chance to ask questions of the witness after the testimony, and then the appellant will have its closing statement.
Okay. If you don't have any, if there aren't any objections, and with your permission, may Franchise Tax Board not have an opening statement and just have a closing statement after the testimony, so we can address any questions or concerns about the witness testimony with its closing statement.
That's fine, Mr. Nam. Unless appellant's representative has any objection to that, that procedure should be fine. The reason why I mentioned in that order was following the pre-hearing conference minutes and orders, but as you know, I was not the lead judge for that procedure, so I think showing some flexibility here is just fine. So we can do that unless Ms. Abadesco has any objection. Do you?
Marie Abadesco, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Abadesco. I'm sorry, Mr. Nam, did you have a comment?
Gina, no, that's all from Franchise Tax Board. Thank you.
Okay, very well. Okay, Ms. Bukalfa, please go ahead.
Thank you. Munia Bukalfa. On April 15, 2018, appellant filed her 2017 tax return in a timely manner. And although appellant had self-prepared her taxes for many years, this was actually the first time she owed the state taxes. In order to pay the taxes owed, appellant provided her banking account details and made sure she had sufficient funds to make the payment. And although appellant made all these efforts, the payment was unfortunately not processed. And appellant's failure to make timely payment was due to reasonable cause as opposed to willful neglect. The stress of the aftermath of the devastating 2000 Sonoma wildfires caused appellant to focus more on relocating, staying safe and healthy, and keeping her job, and not constantly checking whether a payment was processed. Today, Ms. Abadesco will testify and try to show that there was reasonable cause for her failure to pay timely. Thank you. End of
Okay, very well. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll go to the testimony of the appellant. Ms. Abadesco, I'm going to swear you in. Are you ready?
Yes. Marie Abadesco, yes.
Okay, Ms. Abadesco. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Marie Abadesco, yes.
Thank you. As I mentioned, you're free to have your representative ask questions, or you can just tell your story in the narrative. You have 15 minutes, which you don't need to use all of if you don't need it, and please go ahead.
Marie Abadesco, Ms. Monia, you were going to, do you want to proceed with the questions or want me to make a statement? Okay.
Munia Bukalfa, I will ask the questions. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Abadesco. Ms. Abadesco, respondents states in their brief that the direct cause of your difficulties for not paying timely were from the wildfires, were not from the wildfires actually, but from your decision to move back to California for work-related commitments. You contest this, and I was just wondering, could you explain to us what the direct cause was for you of not paying the owed taxes timely?
Maria Abadesco. I take the position that I paid my taxes in time. I paid my taxes on April 15th. I used TaxAct, which is an online service. And at the end of the TaxAct, it prompts you to provide your bank statement or account checking or savings account so that the federal and California tax board can withdraw from your account. So in doing so, I felt that I had paid my taxes on time. It wasn't until June of 2018 that I received notice that I had not paid my taxes, that the California Franchise Tax Board could not access my account, and therefore I turned around and submitted the payment. And I called the California Tax Franchise Board at the time and asked them why this occurred. And they advised me to fill out an appeal form and that it should be remedied at that point in time in terms of a refund of the $1,800 plus penalty fee. So in my own mind, I felt that I had paid my taxes on time.
Munia Bukalfa. Thank you, Ms. Abadesco. Ms. Abadesco, did you have enough funds on April 2018 to pay the taxes owed?
Maria Abadesco. Yes, I did. I had sold my property in San Francisco, California at the time, and so I had sufficient funds to actually pay the amount fully.
Thank you. Munia Bukalfa. You just alluded to it, but on June 14, 2018, you received the notice of state income tax due. That's when you realized that you still have to pay your taxes. What did you do once you received this notice?
Maria Abadesco, as I stated earlier, I called the California Tax Franchise Board immediately and stated that I was surprised about the notification of delinquent payment, and they advised me, as I said, to make the payment. Are we all there?
Yes, we can hear you. This is Judge Ewing.
Yes. Sorry, it sounded like somebody had checked out. They advised me that I had to make the payment and then to file the appeal form, which I did. And I made the payment at that time.
Thank you, Munia Bukalfa. And then my last question. We spoke to each other on Monday, and you told me something interesting. You told me that you felt that there was a comparison between the current pandemic that is affecting all of us worldwide and the Sonoma wildfires. And I was wondering, could you explain to us what you meant by this?
Yes, Maria Abadesco. I felt that at the time of the fires, we were displaced from our property, our rental property. And within the county of Sonoma, there was a kind of a collective psychosis, which is taking place now. And at that time of the fires, I had a sense of unknown because we couldn't enter property within a span of like 10 days. So we didn't know if our place was standing, if our cat was alive, if, other animals were alive on the property. And so we felt pretty isolated, like it is now, except we could gather. So I felt like there was a certain collective psychosis, and the saving grace for my partner and I was that we had property in Florida, and we basically escaped there and had a good reprieve mentally and psychologically, so that we could focus on what we felt the priorities were at the time.
Munia Bukalfa. Thank you, Ms. Abadesco. I have no further questions.
This is Judge Ewing. Thank you both. Judge Johnson, do you have any questions for the witness?
I do have, this is Judge Johnson. I do have two quick questions. A clarification, Ms. Abadesco, you discussed the filing the Tax Act and the requirement at the end of the form to enter payment info, and I might have missed it. Under your recollection, did you enter payment info there, or do you think that it might have been left blank?
Maria Abadesco, thank you for your question, Judge Johnson. I did enter payment. In looking back, I am a member of the Redwood Credit Union, and it's possible because with the federal taxes, the feds sent me a link and said we couldn't access your bank account. So therefore, make the payment on this link. And I think it had to do maybe with my usage of the credit union versus a standard Wells Fargo, a B of A, and that type of thing. But I did make the full payment at the time, or at least my knowledge is that I made the payment and I entered my full bank account information.
Thank you. Judge Johnson again. And the second question, I know in your opening from your rep and your own testimony, you discussed sort of the nature of what was going on during those times. And one of the briefs that was submitted, I believe your reply brief, it was mentioned that you were monitoring your credit union account, and you thought it might take some time for the deduction, the debit, to actually show up and reflect on that account. And then when it didn't show up over time, you weren't exactly clear on what to do. Is that still kind of an accurate statement, or you kind of want to explain the process of what happened after you filed the return? Were you checking the accounts, and did you notice that it wasn't debited?
Maria Abadesco. Yes, Judge, I did monitor, but I didn't monitor as vigilantly as maybe I would have in a time of quote-unquote normalcy for me, because my priorities, once I completed the payment and the tax act and that type of thing, I just put it aside and it was in another lane as far as I was concerned. My orientation had to do with insurance, how do I maintain my job at UC Berkeley because I'm in Florida now versus California, and then figuring out my return plan because our belongings were scattered all over the place. So I did monitor, but it wasn't as vigilantly as maybe, if my mind was really set, and that was a priority.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Abadesco. This is Judge Johnson again. I appreciate your testimony today. That's all the questions I had, Mr. Judge Ewing.
Thank you, Judge Johnson. This is Judge Ewing. Judge Brown, do you have any questions for this witness?
This is Judge Brown. I think I do have a question. Ms. Abadesco, can you talk a little bit more about the timeline when you were saying that you felt like at the time of the Sonoma fires that you and everyone, in the community felt a sense of unknown and you were displaced, and the saving grace that you were able to go to your property in Florida. My understanding is that was in the fall of that was in the fall when the fires happened. Can you talk a little bit more about do you feel like that feeling continued into the spring in April when you were paying your taxes and checking your credit union account? I just want to know if you're saying that continued, or was that just at the time of the fires?
Maria Abadesco. Thank you, Judge Brown. In terms of the timeline, the fires happened October 17th. We went to Florida on the 28th. At that point in time, again, I had mentioned the focus was really the insurance job, and then what it would mean and when it would mean that we would return to California. Upon return to California, I felt, you're coming, it's almost like you left a war zone and you're coming back. And there's still, our property was assessed for smoke damage. So it was very difficult in terms of going into our storage locker because everything was still kind of smoke, kind of had that smoke kind of, sense. And you saw the damage. You saw the damage everywhere. The whole place was ravaged. We were in Kenwood and Glen Ellen. We were fortunate that the cabin that we lived in was the only thing standing within a 150-mile radius. But other than that, you're returning to a war zone, essentially. So going to Florida was a nice reprieve, but coming back, you were re-traumatized. I was at least psychologically re-energized in my return and could focus on job and focused on completing the taxes. We came back early April, and I just felt that it was my due diligence to be a responsible citizen and pay my taxes. So, but once that was over with, again, I placed that part of my checkoff list as done, and I really didn't think much about it except periodically to monitor my bank account and notice that the money hadn't been, withdrawn. I hope that answers the question that you had asked.
Okay. This is Judge Brown. Yes, thank you. This is Judge Brown. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Okay, this is Judge Ewing. Thank you, Judge Brown. It doesn't seem like we have any more questions for the witness. I don't have any questions for the witness, so the witness is now excused. We can move now to, I'm sorry, I need to ask Mr. Nam, do you have any questions for the witness?
No questions for the witness.
Okay, Mr. Nam, thank you. Okay, we can go ahead to the final statements. Mr. Nam, you elected to make your presentation at this time, so please go ahead.
Nam for Franchise Tax Board. It is Franchise Tax Board's position that appellant's oversight of her tax offer's payment function and failure to act after discovering that her payment was not timely debited for 2 bank statement cycles rises to the reasonable cost standard to abate the late payment penalty. Separately, Franchise Tax Board also finds that appellant has not established a basis to abate interest. Appellant has failed to show that her circumstances rises to meet the reasonable cost standard to abate the late payment penalty. In a precedential opinion in the appeal of Friedman, the OTA indicated that the failure to timely pay caused by oversight does not constitute reasonable cause. Furthermore, the OTA held that exercising ordinary business care and prudence would entail ensuring that the payment was actually submitted and the taxpayer has a duty to verify timely payment. This standard was also upheld by the OTA in the appeal of Scanalon. Here, appellant contends that she did notice that her payment was not debited, but did not do anything thinking that it takes time for the Franchise Tax Board to process the payment. In this case, an act of ordinary business care and prudence would be to inquire on the payment status with the tax agency after discovering that the payment was not debited for almost 2 months. Unfortunately, appellant's assumption that there was a payment processing delay is not reasonable. Appellant argues that it is unreasonable to expect victims of wildfire to research how to properly pay using the tax offer system and follow up on the payment status. For wildfire victims, the state had extended the tax payment deadline to January 31st, 2018. However, appellant's tax due date was outside of this relief period. Additionally, appellant concedes that she does not have any medical documentation to show that her mental stress prevented her from timely paying. Furthermore, a review of the records, such as her bank statement, doesn't show that the alleged mental stress completely prevented her from carrying on her daily life and appeared to be well enough to work around the time the tax was due. While respondent understands appellant's loss and unintentional error, the fire had occurred over 6 months prior to the date appellant tried to make her payment, and without medical documentation, respondent is unable to find that the effects of the wildfire that happened 6 months ago continuously and completely prevented her from timely paying or following up with the processing of her payment. Lastly, appellant has not shown any basis to abate interest. Therefore, respondent's actions should be sustained. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Judge Johnson, do you have any questions for Mr. Nam?
This is Judge Johnson. No questions. Thank you.
And this is Judge Ewing. Judge Brown, do you have any questions for Mr. Nam?
This is Judge Brown. I think I just have one question. Mr. Nam, the document that you submitted as Exhibit L that contains a printout of the payment information, what it is says the raw e-file data for tax year 2017. I wanted to ask if you could just explain it further, because in the document, I think it was in this document or it was in a brief accompanying the document. Oh yes, here it is. You wrote there's no payment request for the state return. If there was a state payment request, it would be located between, and then you give some spots and some language. And then later in the document, that is highlighted with an arrow about where the payment information should be.
Yes, I do recall, and I am looking at this is the yes, I do recall, and I am looking at Exhibit L, and I did make that notation in our library. And to answer your question, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Judge Brown. I was just going to say, I should have mentioned that the arrow is on page 3 of Exhibit L. Please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yes, this is Guy Nam for Franchise Tax Board. Yes, there is an arrow indicated on page 3 of Exhibit L, and this document was produced by Franchise Tax Board's personnel who works at who deals with e-filing, receiving e-file returns, and they indicated by producing this code language that usually where this arrow is placed, that's where the payment information for state taxes would be located, and it was not located in this code language. So we cannot find any indication that a payment information was included with this e-file return. And just to remind you, Judge, even in when a taxpayer does e-file or make an e-pay, our presidential opinion requires them to wait for the acknowledgement and here, so it wouldn't really matter whether or not the payment was actually, if there was a technical error and the payment was not processed.
This is Judge Brown. All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
This is Judge Ewing. Thank you, Judge Brown. Now we can go to appellant's closing. And Ms. Bukalfa, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Munya Bukalfa. Based on appellant's testimony, it seems obvious there was no willful neglect from appellant's side, and she actually did everything within her powers to pay the taxes owed in a timely manner. She filed her tax return in time. She made sure she had enough funds to pay the taxes she owed. We believe there is reasonable cause that led to her failure to pay timely. She was the victim of a devastating wildfire, and appellant was under the impression that she did everything correctly regarding her taxes. But once the wildfire happened, she was focused on keeping her job, keeping her income, securing a rental, and staying healthy in the midst of all. The aftermath of a wildfire is overwhelming for any person, and the stress that appellant was enduring should be considered a reason for which she was continuously unable to confirm if her tax payment was processed. It's very hard to say, well, after 3 months you should get over the wildfire and then check your taxes on a daily basis. Ms. Abadesco did everything within her powers to make sure that the payment was done in time. And as I mentioned before, indeed, she did everything within her power to make a timely payment. And even once she realized the payment was due, she immediately made the payment. And this shows there was no willful neglect. And lastly, like Appellant just stated while making her striking comparison with the current pandemic that is affecting all of us, if you are a victim of a wildfire or basically any disaster, your main concern is your health, your loved ones, and keeping your job. And respondent's position is actually saying to appellants, well, although you did everything in your power to pay your taxes, we are still punishing you for being overwhelmed too long in the face of the aftermath of a natural disaster. And this seems actually quite unfair. End of statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bukasa. All right. I think we can go ahead and end today's telephonic oral hearing. To wrap up,
Maria Abadesco, Judge Ewing, Maria Abadesco, can I just make a couple statements?
Yes, Ms. Abadesco, please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Maria Abadesco. Just two things. In response to Mr. Nam's statement, when the federal tax board prompted me that they couldn't access my Redwood Credit Union, I had also mentally made the assumption that I would get a similar prompt from the California franchise tax, which didn't happen, obviously, but I just made that assumption in my mind. And then secondly, I pursued this case because I felt not only as being a victim of the fire, but secondly, I felt the $1,800 penalty charge was exorbitant. And as a citizen and a taxpayer of California, I'm willing to split the penalty. I know there was a delay, but I just felt that it was exorbitant given my situation and just the collective situation of what took place in Sonoma and Napa during that time frame of 2017. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Abadesco, thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, so to wrap up, I really want to thank both of the parties, Ms. Abadesco, Ms. Bukasa, and Mr. Nam, for being flexible with this hearing format. It's a little tricky, but you have done a very good job presenting your cases, and we appreciate your time. We're ready to submit this case. The judges will meet and decide the case based on the briefs, the evidence in the record, and the arguments presented today. We will send both parties our written decision no later than 100 days from today. The record is now closed, and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and we very much appreciate your time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.